Hi guys, in this tutorial I'm going to look at how to get a password to accept a maximum number of attempts to log in. Now, one of my students has been trying this with a loop and with little success. There are ways of doing this with loops, but they are a little complicated. So I thought I'd look at a different way of doing it, and here we can look at a way of getting a database to accept a maximum number, in this case 3 attempts at a login, and after 3 attempts it's going to boot you. I'll kick you off the system. Now what I've done is, as you can see, I've already created a username label and text box and a password label and text box. So if you have a look at these with me, username and password are just labels, so it doesn't really matter. And these 2 text boxes, this is called text username and this is called text password. And I've got a button here that's going to verify them, or the code's going to verify them rather, and that's called button login. So I'm going to look at now how to get this button to check these 2, if they're valid or not, and if they are valid, to allow you into the program. If they're not, to deny access. But crucially, what it's going to do is it's going to count the number of attempts you've made to log in, and if it goes beyond a maximum of 3, it should prevent you from logging in or attempting any further. So how are we going to do that? Well, first of all, we're not going to use a loop, but what we are going to take advantage of is we're going to take advantage of global and local variables. Now, what's key here is to know that when a local variable is running, it doesn't reset a global variable. So if you set a global variable and then run a local variable outside of that, every time the local variable runs, the global variable will remain active and will continue to log. And that is key, because I'm going to stick the attempts at logging in into the global variable, that is the public class, and I'm going to leave everything else in the private class, that is the local variable. So let's have a look at this now. Obviously everything's going to hinge on the login button. So I'll go there now and I'll log in. Now the first thing I'm going to do in public class, I'm going to put a variable in there and I'm going to call it attempt. So I type in dim attempt as integer and I'm going to set that as 0. Now that will initialize the variable as 0. Now whatever happens out here won't happen in here in the private. So every time this runs, this isn't reset. That's the crucial point here. This will continue active every time this runs. So every time this runs, if I can get this to add this up by 1 every time this runs, this will not reset back to 0, and that is key. So let's have a go at this. First of all, I'm going to set variables dim username and password, and I'm going to set them as strings. Okay, so dim username, password as strings. Anyone who isn't familiar with how I've actually gone into this code, I just double clicked on this button to get in there. So obviously I've set so far this, and I've set 2 variables called username and password. I've set them as strings. Now I want to tell VB now where to find these. So I say username is going to be present in text username dot text. Obviously you've got to tell it there's going to be text appearing in that text box, and then password is going to be in text password dot text. Okay, so I've started now. I've set my 3 variables. I've set one called attempt, I've set one called username, I've set one called password, and I've told the system where to find username and password. Now next I'm going to start the routine that's going to check for the passwords. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get it to check for correct passwords. Now anyone who's looked at my tutorials before now, you'll be familiar with this. It's going to be a simple if statement, or an if else statement, else if statement, sorry. It's going to be if username equals, I'm just going to call it user for now, and password equals password, oops, then message box welcome, and you can see over here I've created a new form which has got absolutely jack all in it, but that's what I'm going to get it to open. So message box welcome, then form 2.show and me.hide. So that will then, if the username is user and the password is password, it'll give this nice little message box on screen, it'll show form2, and it'll hide itself. Okay. The next thing is I'm going to give it a second password. You can go on as long as you like with this, setting in username and passwords. Incidentally, this isn't the best way of doing it. The best way is to get a password table or array going on somewhere, and I'm going to show that in future at some point when I get time. So next thing is to show my password too. So else if username equals, and I call this one user2, and password equals password2, then again message box, welcome user2, form2 show, and me hide once again. Now here comes the magic. We needed to now sort of start adding up the attempts, the number of attempts that people have made to log in. So I'm going to start off by doing the routine that's going to handle it if the attempts hit 3 attempts. Now you haven't got to do it in this order, this is the way I'm logically going to do it. So I type in, first of all, else if, and you remember up here I set the attempt as 0 to start off. Now what I'm going to do is get this routine to handle it if it's had 3 attempts. So I type in else if attempt equals 3, that is the number of attempts at having a go to password has been 3, then message box maximum number of attempts program will now close. And what I'll do is when attempts hit 3, it'll say you've had enough, go away, basically. So obviously now for the go away routine, I just type in close, and that'll close the program. Or you can do exit or whatever you like, really. Now you can see so far I've got an if and an if for the people who've got it right. I've got a routine that handles it when it goes up to 3 attempts, but I've got nothing that actually increments it every time. So that's the last bit I'm going to do. So the final thing is else message box username and password incorrect, oops, please re-enter, you currently have reached attempt space close inverted commas. And now what I want to do is to tell it how many times it's attempted. Now you'll realize I've set a variable called attempt here, and I'm going to employ this now. So I said username and password incorrect, please re-enter, you will currently reach attempt, stop the sentence, ampersand, which is a squiggly and then type in attempt and another ampersand, then a space, then of 3. And what that should do then is it should tell the user every time they've made an attempt, username and password incorrect, please re-enter it, you've reached attempt, and it'll tell them then whatever attempt they've reached. Now what I haven't done is made the bit that's actually going to increment the attempt. So I'll go down the line now, and the next thing I do is I type in attempt equals attempt plus 1, and then finally, just to tidy things up, I'll clear the username text box like so, and I'll clear the password text box like so, and then finally I'll stick the focus, or set the focus back on the username text box. So what that should do now, let's just run through it. First of all, it sets the counter at 0, it sets the username and password and tells the computer where they're going to be. Then it checks if they're correct. If they're correct, in these 2 instances, it opens form 2. Then, if the number of attempts is hit 3, it'll kick them off the program, and then the final routine looks at the number of attempts they've made, increments it by 1, and then if the user has gone, oops, I've got focus on focus there. And if the user's gone up 1 attempt, it'll increment the attempt by 1. It'll tell them they've incremented it, and then it'll clear them and set them back on a focus. Unless, of course, they've hit 3 attempts, and this line then will execute and boot them. So let's give that a go. Oops, I've forgotten a bracket somewhere, so it's on line 19, so let's get my line numbers up. If you don't know how to do that, you just go to Tools, you go to Options, you go to Text Editor Basic over here, you show all settings, and you can get your line numbers up there, and it'll give you line numbers. So I can see now that I've forgotten on line 19 according to my debugger. So up here, forgot to close a bracket over there. Handy little tip there. So I'll just run that now, and if I type in user and password, now I haven't masked the password, that's just a property on the text box. That'll allow me in, open form 2. Try it again now. Let's get something wrong this time. So username, password incorrect, please enter your retention attempt 0 of 3, okay. 1 of 3, 2 of 3, and maximum number of attempts 3, program will now close. Now what you've noticed there is that something's gone a little bit squiffy in that it gave me 0 of 3 attempts. Now that's pretty obvious why it's happened. You can see why there's a number of reasons. But what I'm going to do is, to sort it out in a rough and ready, quick and easy way, is I'm going to set the attempt, rather than 0, I'm going to set it to 1 before it initiates. Now you could just move it. You can see what's happened here is that the message comes before the attempt box is incremented. What I've done to save time is just incremented it to 1. Now if I just run that again, what you can see now is if I get things wrong, attempt 1 of 3, attempt 2 of 3, maximum attempts 3, program will now close. So that's worked pretty well. And yeah, that's it. So I'll just leave the code up for a second so you can have a little look at it. And take in whatever you need. So you haven't got to pause at any critical point. And yeah, that's it. We're done. That's how you get a login to allow you into another form and give you, well, it's one way of doing it anyway. There's multiple ways of doing this. That's one, possibly the easiest way of getting a form to register the number of attempts. And as you remember, what we've done is we've split a global variable with a local subroutine. And yeah, we're done.